The Intertidal Zone. The intertidal zone is the area between the land and sea that is covered by water at high tide and uncovered at low tide. This zone has 4 different areas. The low tide zone, which is usually wet, middle tide zone, wet and dry, high tide zone, wet during high tide, and the spray zone, which is usually dry. The next zone we have is the low tide zone. In this zone we have many starfish, occasional sea anemone, and a lot of mussel. This area is usually extremely wet and is up against rocks and occasional sandy areas. This area can also have some small fish and other plant-like material like sea kelp. Interesting facts of the intertidal zone. Mussels have a web-like material that can keep them up against the rocks. Crab will hide under algae. Barnacles will glue themselves to the rocks, and periwinkle snails have a material on them that can help them stay put. Our next area is the middle tide zone. The middle tide zone has many starfish, barnacles, mussels, and limpets. This area is usually up against the smaller amount of rocks, more toward the front of the beach and on the sandier parts. Occasional tide pools will be located here as well. Our next area is the high tide zone. The high tide zone will have crabs, hermit crabs, a lot of mussels, as well as barnacles and occasional periwinkle snails. This area is the tide pool zone, which will also have occasional sea anemones, small fish that have landed up into the tide pools, sea kelp, algae, and other moss-like material will grow upon the rocks to make it slippery when wet. The next and last zone is the spray zone. The spray zone is full of grass and moss-like plants that will grow in the sand from birds that have brought seeds onto the sand. Other animals that live here are the occasional periwinkle snails. Most mussels will grow here as well for the occasional tide pools that are brought in from the ocean. And dried up algae will wash up onto shore as well. The climate for each zone. The low tide zone has a cooler temperature because of constant water contact. The middle tide zone is full of cool water. The high tide zone is usually one of the hottest because of direct sunlight, and the spray zone is the hottest, usually about 65 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Location for intertidal zones are shorelines, rocky beaches, shell sand beaches, and practically any other shorelines. Thank you.